All right, it's 2:03. I'm going to call the meeting to order.
How about 12:03?
12:03. I just saw the two. I told you, I need to get a little older here. Wishful thinking.
You were telling us it's ending at 2:03.
Yeah, that's it. There we go. So 12:03, call the meeting to order. And, so you did get an agenda sent out. And, so let's, go through a roll call. Who wants to, do that today?
Well, technically I'm the secretary, so I'll call the roll. Egan.
Here.
Lasky.
Here.
Becker.
Here.
Adam Donce.
Here.
Karen Goodman.
Here.
Cindy Kaminsky.
Here.
Donce. Jeff, here.
And do we have a motion to approve the agenda? Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, I know we have someone on the line here.
Actually, we do not yet,
Oh, okay, okay. So we don't have any public comment at this time.
not right now.
All right. All right. Right into it, folks. Number 5. So when we last met, that was the calm before the storm. So, everyone received a, email from Barry, late Friday, and, you've had a chance to look over that. Does anyone want to, dive in now with questions, comments? Barry, do you have anything to add?
I can add some things, but they're more, I think will be
Right.
in line with the discussion.
Right.
So
Right.
yesterday on Friday I had a call with Boutique, yesterday I had a call with DOT and Contour.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got
Why don't you start with those?
updated
Yeah.
information.
Yep.
Well, but it's all updated information based on what is already there. So I guess I'll start with Boutique.
Okay.
So, and actually, as a result of my call, Sean Simpson forwarded to me, a couple emails that he has had in exchange with DOT on the topic. And, this didn't quite I'm going to manually collate here while we're, actually, yeah, that's page 1.
Page 1.
So we-
Another page 1.
So that's the first email, is those 2 pages,
All right.
and then this is the
Page
second.
1 of email. Oh, there you go. Is that the same? Page 2 of email 2?
Yep.
No. Not the same. The 8th one, the 7th.
Page 3 of email 2?
Ah.
So, and again, I could bring those up on screen, but since they're, I'm not sure DOT's intention was that they were publicly, so I just can print them and we can talk to them.
Cool.
Actually, I think I'll start with my call with DOT yesterday. That's really the impetus for us getting together at this time, is the call I had with them now 2 weeks ago. But basically, they couldn't give me any additional information, which means the decision process is not completed yet. What they did tell me is it is out of their office and it is now being finalized / decided at levels above them. The indication was that it is now a political decision as opposed to a factual decision. So other parties get involved at that point. And they are hopeful that DOT could issue their results by the end of this week. So that was my discussion with DOT, my update yesterday from them. Not very informative, but it's also, I know that they can't say things until they're official, because that's not the way that works. But, so that was that conversation. Boutique's conversation with Friday, basically, DOT's concern is that Boutique will not be able to start service October 1st. And DOT doesn't want to be in a situation where that becomes an issue. Ultimately, it makes more work for them if the carrier can't start when they're supposed to. The two emails are basically Boutique's response to Boutique's questions to them on that. Boutique is confident that they'll be able to start they'll be in a position to start well before then, as it relates to essentially 3 or 4 issues that DOT has somehow raised. This is highly unusual, I would say. DOT's, my knowledge has never gone into this level of depth in understanding where a carrier is in their process with their aircraft and FAA requirements. So for whatever reason, DOT is kind of going a little bit outside of what they normally do in this situation. And Sean talks to that in the email. But the 4 issues that DOT raised were, will Boutique have the aircraft? Will the aircraft be recognized with the FAA as being operable for the intended purposes? There is a landing gear change that apparently is necessary, so there's discussion about that. And then the 4th thing, escaping me right now, it'll probably pop into my head as we talk about this. So on aircraft...
Single engine.
Huh?
Single engine.
Yeah. That's not what these emails are about.
Okay.
So on aircraft availability, obviously Boutique has one in-house. They are ready to enter into an agreement with a lessor for 3 additional aircraft. They actually, in one of those emails, give out the tail numbers of the 3 aircraft, so they're not just making that up. There's actually 3 physical aircraft. That lessor actually has 7 aircraft available for them if they wanted more. So that is issue number 1. Issue number 2 is the FAA side of things. Boutique used to have the Piaggio on their certificate, and they removed it since it wasn't being used in that purpose. So as Boutique talks about here, a very different process to re-add something that used to be approved as opposed to starting from scratch to get it approved. So they don't see any issue with that process since it's basically just resurrecting the paperwork and getting it back on their certificate. From a maintenance program, they highlight that their maintenance program is the manufacturer's recommended maintenance program, so there's nothing special that FAA needs to review or approve there. from a pilot training program. They're partnering with the largest flight trainer in the country for safety or something like that. Again, not something that would cause a red flag in an approval process. So, and then they're scheduled within the next 30 days for the landing gear fix that apparently is required in this. So Boutique response to DOT is that everything is in order and is in process to be completed well in advance of October 1st. And then Boutique gets into a little bit of trying to, just understand why DOT is going down this path. They talk a lot about previous bids that they've had that were they were much farther from being able to start, and these issues never came up, and Boutique was able to start on time in those cases. And then they speculate that they believe DOT's rationale in this is that DOT doesn't want to award the frequency that we in Boutique have selected, and therefore is trying to use this as a means of forcing a less capacity to our market. So Boutique talks about that in one of those emails as well.
Can you restate or elaborate on that statement? The DOT's way of forcing a lesser...
And again, this is Boutique speculation.
Right.
And
It's pretty clear that they're a little, almost feels like he's saying they're overstepping there.
well, yes, that is his opinion. So this is in the second email, second page, basically halfway down that page. I'll just read out that paragraph. I understand that the option that the authority supported and that Mr. Lynn submitted on behalf of Manistee is requesting more frequencies than the community has now, and that this presents a potentially uncomfortable issue for the DOT. But in Barry's letter, he is pointing out legitimate parts of the EAS regulations that are in fact issues for the DOT and not of Boutique Air. And here I'm referring to the rights of the community to have frequencies, load factors, 50% on 8 or 9 passenger aircraft. While it would be convenient to be able, I think is what that is meant to say, to sidestep that issue by formulating rationale for why Boutique Care cannot perform, the reality is that we are doing everything that is appropriate to be able to execute the contract on time, if not well ahead of schedule. So that ties into some of the broader things that I discussed in my email to the board as well. So that's the information from Boutique, and my call basically echoed what's kind of the contents of this email. Boutique was not aware of what DOT had told me, that they were, at the time I talked to them 2 weeks ago, leaning towards going out for a rebid, but that would kind of be consistent with their DOT's understanding of the situation. Whether this information changed their opinion or not remains to be seen. Then yesterday, my call with Contour, they would be more than happy to still work with us if that was our decision. As I discussed in my email summary, given what DOT has also told me and what they have communicated with Contour, is that they are currently no longer issuing waivers for the scheduled air service clause, and therefore any agreement with Contour would have to be under alternate EAS. The thing about alternate EAS is that's something that we can choose to do really at any time through this process, so we don't have to wait, if we wanted to change course and go that direction. We would just need to basically notify DOT that that was our intention. And historically, what DOT would do is they would stop everything else, and, basically we would pick up with our intention on that, assuming they would approve contour and the subsidy rate and the general conditions of that, agreement. But given that we would most likely just utilize Contour's previous bid for frequencies and aircraft type and city and cost, that's kind of all, known to DOT already at this point.
Barry, help me understand the waiver.
Sure.
The reason to go to the alternate, I'm at a loss here on that.
So, like we previously did with public charters, currently the Contour operates 30-seat aircraft under what's known as Part 380, the public charters clause of FAA operating regulations. And DOT ruled back in 2012, when we were first going down this path, that service operating under Part 380, they do not consider meeting the definition of scheduled air service, even though it is on a schedule and the schedule's posted. It doesn't technically meet their definition. So therefore, since EAS says that we are entitled to scheduled air service, without a waiver to service that isn't considered scheduled air service, that's not something that can be awarded through standard EAS. DOT has, for a number of years now, been allowing that as a waiver. But as I discussed in my email, with the ongoing petition of SkyWest to begin operating EAS under Part 380, and some of the pushback that SkyWest is receiving on that, and the fact that that request has been open for over a year on DOT's docket, DOT apparently is basically saying we're not going to issue any more waivers at this level until that issue gets addressed at higher levels. That doesn't preclude alternate EAS, which doesn't have all of those same rules and definitions. It's intended to allow things outside the box for service. And Contour actually operates most of its airports currently under alternate EAS agreements, but has recently been doing more under standard EAS since DOT had been allowing those waivers. Did that answer your question?
Well, no, I'm trying to figure out the scheduling aspect.
Yes.
So we're allotted 12 flights with Contour a week. So we rob Peter to pay Paul. So in the wintertime, maybe we only run 8 or 7, and then we take that and throw them for the summer when we need them. Is that what we're referring to as scheduling and the ability to do that? Or am I, because again, a schedule is a schedule. If FAA or DOT says due to scheduling, but yet there's a schedule, I'm not grasping.
Their definition of the word schedule is different than a layman's definition.
The rest of the world section.
Or the rest of the world. It's not an English definition, it's a technical definition that scheduled air service is defined to be Part 135 or Part 21 service.
So back to Jeff's question then, would we have the authority then to set the number of flights per week?
We
And would we
So-
have that flexibility to change our mind along the way?
Yes,
Because as I understand it, that kind of turns into a block grant. We become the financial,
correct.
king of the hill here, and we're paying the airline from this office rather than from
Correct.
DOT.
We become a pass-through as opposed to them getting it direct.
Exactly, yeah,
Which is what we've done before.
right.
For the
Now-
eight years
yeah.
we were in alternates,
Right.
you know, we experienced that, process.
So did Manistee jimmy around the schedule back then?
Yes, yeah, we had more flights scheduled in the summer and less in the winter.
But it was our call, not the airline or the DOT, or
Well,
with permission?
DOT, they squeeze alternate into their computer systems, and their computer systems have flags that say how many flights per month, how many flights per week. So there is flexibility, but DOT really wants to know ahead of time what the schedule will be so they can program it into their systems so that they can pay. So yes, there is flexibility, but it is constrained by the processes that DOT has put into place. But we would have, you know, the ability to figure that out before they started service, so that DOT could load all of the information into their system. And then probably we could change it on an annual basis. And
Okay.
we do, if I asked DOT every month for something different, they would push back hard and basically say, we're not going to pay you because.
So would the airline provider. I mean, they would want some
Oh, sure,
continuity in their
yeah,
schedule
of course.
as well, so.
And in general, you want a schedule that's published months in advance, that the public can trust in too. So there are lots of reasons, but.
Well, I'm thinking after a
Yes,
year.
there is flexibility, but there are also constraints,
Right.
practicality.
So I would tell you, what I look at in this correspondence that Barry sent to us on Friday is, as you go, let me see how far, quite a ways down, you get into the section where it talks about all the other EAS airports in Michigan. And the great concern for me is this, in Ironwood, they've got a small plane, don't they?
No,
Oh, they got a big one?
they currently have Denver Air Connection with
Okay, so this one's missing. So Manistee's got the little tiny plane. And the concern I've got is setting this up, if we don't have more enplanements to change this dynamic, if that even does change the dynamic in the future for us, is an enormous catch for us. Because if we were only allotted 12 weekly flights and 6 per day, 6 seats per day, that would be a tremendous change from what we're used to.
So, my email kind of talked through 3 different things. First was DOT call and kind of the selection process. That second section, which you're in there, is what's currently in the FAA reauthorization bill that the Senate passed last Thursday. The House did not get to doing it on Friday. They did a week extension of the current continuing resolution on that. So the House is expected to pass it this week. Assuming that happens, and again, that bill is what came out of the reconciliation committee, I guess, between the House and Senate on, that topic. So it's expected to pass the House without change, but until that happens, you never know. But those are the factors in that new bill that change the definition of EAS that we will be working under for the next 5 years. And so the summary there is that this clause that I pound on heavily in my existing letter to DOT that talks about our justification for the level of service we're requesting, which Sean talks about in that thing I quoted, that language is removed. So there is no longer a 50% maximum load factor language in the new to-be-approved bill. So therefore, then the only definition falls back to this language that still does remain, that refers to these determination levels of our service. Ours was done in 1984, and I graphed out yesterday our history of employments from 61 through last year.
Mhm.
And that period of time from roughly 82 through 87 was by far our lowest period of time. I think it reflects, A, the economic condition of the community at that time, and B, we had switched at that time from North Central to an airline called Simmons, I believe was the name.
Yeah.
And they flew from here, I think, to Oshkosh, and then from Oshkosh to Chicago. So it was a multi-hop stop, and I think some actually flights went to Manitowoc, and then maybe to Oshkosh, and then Chicago. Our numbers went from 5,000 a year down to about 1,500 total passengers a year. We did 12,000 last year, so it's about a tenth of what we're doing now.
Yeah.
And that is the time period that they made the determination as to what level of service we needed.
Mhm.
If you were to look at the data from roughly 2000 till now, there's a fairly, Frontier is an anomaly, COVID is an anomaly, but there's a fairly, relative slope of increased growth
Mhm.
through that period that gets us to where we are today, which says that what DOT did back 40 years ago isn't necessarily relevant, but it is what they technically consider our level of service.
This really isn't part of the conversation right now, but what do we have to do to get that updated? And I know we can't do that today, but
Right.
is that something that we
Well,
can
I
attack?
quote in there the language,
Yeah,
and
right.
that is, I'm not aware that anyone, the language says DOT should periodically.
Yeah,
That's
that's pretty open-ended.
never been, it's never been done.
Mhm.
No airport has ever gone through, they don't even have a process to do this.
That's my answer then.
B, it doesn't require that they make any changes, it just says they review and then they may adjust. They can't adjust lower, but in our case, there is no lower. So that is a completely undocumented, unknown process that at some point we're going to need to get DOT to address just because of our situation there.
Mhm.
But it does become more relevant once the new bill is passed, and that becomes the standard they're working under, as opposed to the language that's in place today.
Mhm.
And it's
you
therefore
have-
relevant because it all potentially comes into timing of what we do when we do it in this process.
Barry, can you, succinctly and specifically,
I'm not good at the thing, so therefore, I'll try.
I'm trying to look like a horse with blinders.
Yes.
When that bill takes effect, what specifically is the consequence to us here?
Potentially, DOT can ignore everything we decide and choose the lowest bid that is at least 6 passengers per day, 12 flights per week.
Okay,
That is worst case scenario.
so, I got a couple more questions. One, is there anything in your conversations with DOT that they have signaled to you that they would not approve the contour bid?
No.
Okay. 2, if we chose to go with the contour bid, is there anything that we do that limits our autonomy, control, discretion, creates some sort of hardship here at this airport for us? Okay,
I
so
mean,
you're,
In general, I mean,
Okay,
alternate EAF, it's a different process, it's more work, but we've done it before, so therefore it's a known quantity.
I'm
So I
just,
mean, so, yes, technically, but in practice, it's nothing that we can't handle.
okay. So we have received no direction from DOT that they would not approve contour. We see no downside in practice, and I don't understand how technically, but I guess if not in practice, that's fine. And we're on the eve of potentially looking down the barrel of some federal legislation that limits potentially the right of 2 flights a day, or the right of frequency that this airport would have. That,
Overall capacity.
okay, so, would a contract with Contour work to secure increasing capacity during the term of that contract? That is to say, if we entered into a 3-year contract with Contour, provided that the DOT would not terminate that contract mid-contract,
Yep.
we would secure a greater capacity for 3 years than we would with any other option in terms of capacity of available seats leaving this airport.
Yes.
Is that true? Okay. All right.
Now, I will balance that with the boutique option that we currently, selected, also accomplishes most of that. It is not as many seats as we've talked about, but it is significantly more than we have today, allows us to continue growing at still a very good clip, but we chose a 2-year agreement. So there is a 2-year agreement versus a Contours was 3 years. So there is a difference there in length of that horizon that we're kind of locking in.
Well, maybe, and I think this is in your spreadsheet, if we look at just the numbers of available seats, what is that contrast between available seats on Contour versus available seats in boutique? I think you've done that math, haven't you? Because where I'm really going with it, with respect to the available seats, is the money of $1 million a year. To the extent we have some surplus capacity, and looking at what flights are from Chicago to Traverse City, those prices can be extremely expensive during the summer months, $800, $1,000, $1,200 a ticket. And Manistee could take some of that based on the ticket cap, and I think we could find ourselves with $1 million a year sooner than later by filling some of those extra seats as an alternative to get people to the north out of Chicago.
So boutique's capacity, number of total seats flown, roughly 25,000 annually, and Contours, 37,000.
Okay.
There is more capacity with 30-seat aircraft operating twice a day loosely versus 9-seat operating on average 4 times.
So to hit $10,000, for correction, to hit $1 million and get $1 million a year, you've got to be on average 27% full on a Contour plane. And I think when we figured that, it was much higher in terms of the occupancy of the plane.
It all, I mean, on average, yes, but we vary so much from January to July, and it depends on how many flights you've got, so, and if anyone pulled up those spreadsheets, it kind of lays in that schedule and, shows load factors by month, and yes, you've got excess capacity, even though we've reduced the schedule, but like with Contour, you can't go less than one a day, even though theoretically, if you did less, then maybe you could bump the frequency, but probably you're just turning people away because you're not even offering convenient service. Whereas in the summer, with Contour, you know, assuming significant growth, we actually could fill those seats up many days in the summer, with 2 flights a day.
Right.
Boutique, same scenario, it varies differently based on their proposed schedule, but it's the same overall issue. You're never gonna get 100% occupancy, and you're never gonna have the perfect schedule that the 3rd week of March, we have this many, and the 4th week, we have this many, because it, you know, gradually ramps up. So there are inefficiencies, so therefore, I will say that having more total seats makes those inefficiencies less of an issue, because you've got more to go around.
Right, almost 40% more capacity.
But there are inefficiencies in both models.
That's gonna be a given.
The negative consequence of the inefficiency is mitigated the more seats you have,
Correct.
allowing you to
Now,
increase your.
and again, you know, this gets into pros and cons of higher frequency. I mean, having 5 or 6 flights a day, you know,
Easier
anybody
access.
can make any connection because of that. 2 flights a day, you're more limited. You know, there's that. I mean, if Detroit is still a consideration for this board, with 2 flights a day, you don't do Detroit, because now you're
Correct.
providing
Yeah.
not enough frequency to
Yeah.
either airport.
Mhm.
With 5 flights a day, you can have that option, because you can still have 2 to Detroit, and then, you know,
Mhm.
3 or 4 into Chicago, and that gives you enough capacity to do those both. So,
The total
you need to get
capacity
into all of
constant
the
is-
decision points that we've talked about, so.
The total capacity remains constant. We split
Correct.
the destinations. So we're not increasing capacity to serve 2 markets. Capacity stays constant, and
But you're improving customer service, potentially.
well, I think potentially, if we didn't have to go through security when we got to Detroit, and we had a gate, and we could see our luggage when we arrived at our destination. I think when you peel the layer of the onion back and you ask the customer, do you want to buy 2 tickets and go through the rigmarole of security when you get there? It's not as.
If you're getting another flight.
Yes, well, true. And so then I guess the question is, Karen, in my mind, I think we stand a much greater chance to get $1 million a year with 10,000 enplanements through Contour. So now, in my calculus, I say, what's the cost-benefit analysis of $3 million to the airport, assuming we can get our 10,000 enplanements for 3 years, or $2 million, or even ratchet it down and say we only get $1 million for 1 year of the 3-year contract in year 3, versus how many people are going to go to the Tiger baseball game, and what's that level of service we provide in relation to the benefit of $1 million or $2 to the airport, is kind of how I'm weighing it on the scale.
When the man from Contour was here, he didn't even seem interested in Detroit, or that he was gonna even try it.
Well, that won't be very
This is their proposal of
What-
only two
No.
flights
They don't
a
have
day,
enough
it doesn't
flights.
make
Yeah,
sense
you
at this
put it,
point.
yeah,
And our track record is Chicago, so,
Right.
Yeah.
yeah.
you know, why, I mean, I am sure that if we came out of this meeting saying we want to dump Chicago and go with Contour and Detroit, Matt would find a way to make it possible, but that's not where I think he thinks is our path forward for strongest demand at this point.
Mhm.
And you go to an airport that's a hub for one carrier versus an airport that's a hub for two carriers, being American and United and Chicago.
And he also doesn't have Delta Airlines and is the partner with American.
Well, nobody has Delta Interline or Coach.
Yeah, they don't
Presently.
like to play.
They don't play ball.
No, they don't like to play.
The fact that, Department of Transportation is still using 1984 numbers, and they're not showing any willingness to change it, even if we get up there, who's to say they're even going to take
I
that
didn't,
into
I mean,
consideration?
if I gave the impression that they're unwilling to change, they don't have a process. This has
Yeah.
never come up,
So they're just,
so therefore, and.
even though our numbers have been there for years and years and years.
I think the question is more of, from a technical standpoint, if you had somebody wanted to exercise that option, it's available to them.
Yeah.
Not that they're looking to do that.
Right. They're not gonna do anything different till they get.
And then the other flip side of that, from a political standpoint, the more people I can get in a plane and make it more popular here, the more difficult it becomes to pull that away as well.
Right,
So again, it goes back to numbers,
yeah.
And this whole,
money
this
and seats.
ES thing is a big money drain, basically, for the government.
So
other
it's
than-
really, we got it kind of a catch-22. I mean, from my perspective, frequency is a plus,
Mhm.
yet jet service is a very big plus. So, because a lot of people prefer the jet over the smaller planes.
Mhm.
But if they are gonna fly from Manistee, it is nice to have more than two options a day to catch the other flights. You don't have a 5-hour layover, which sometimes they do anyway when they fly out of here. They have a 5-hour layover in Chicago. I know this is like really here and there, but, I remember when I asked about, you said Chicago's more popular and we have people that go just to Chicago. I start thinking about that, and it may be true, I don't know for a fact, but there is other people that will go there, and then they'll connect, like when I went to Iceland Air, they don't have you have to buy 2 different tickets. I have people that prefer Southwest, they get to Chicago, they want to fly from Manistee, you get to Chicago, you're switching to Southwest, 2 different tickets, so all these tickets where you're buying the separate ticket doesn't show your connection, you think you're just going to Chicago.
Mhm.
I don't
You
I'm
know about
somebody-
the layovers, I think when we looked at the scheduling, the gentleman from Contour said there would be an early morning flight, a 7:30, 8:30 AM departure sometime in the morning, and there would be an afternoon flight. So, you know, international flights, don't they leave 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the afternoon?
Yeah, so I mean, if you had
Generally,
a
for
flight
going to
here
Europe.
at 3, it probably wouldn't connect very well, if you had a 6 o'clock, which is fine,
Well-
which a lot of them are, but if you had a noon, 2 or 3, you'd have to take the morning and have a longer there, which, you know, it's not always bad, I mean,
Is
at
an
least you know you're there.
That's the way we do it.
Is an
Yeah,
American
at least you know you're there.
affiliate, he said they were looking at what all of American's connecting flights are and trying to optimize the departure time here to get you into Chicago with the least amount of layover. Yeah, some people might have a 3-hour layover, but they're cognizant of that because they're an American affiliate.
Right,
trying to
yeah.
minimize
And I mean, I've
that.
done that myself, I've done a 4 or 5 hour layover in Chicago, just so that I know I'm there
Yeah.
to make my connection. Or
I
I
just
prefer the
think-
morning, so that you know you're getting there, so you don't have to worry about a later flight
Yeah,
being
that's-
canceled or delayed.
That's how we always do
Yeah.
that. And we did the same thing, we flew Aer Lingus, a month or 2 ago, and had to do the same thing,
Yeah,
redo all the stuff, but.
yeah.
I don't see, Delta playing nice with anybody other than SkyWest for interlines and code shares. SkyWest is their preferred, regional jet.
Which is part of 25% of
Contour.
Contour now.
So that is a possibility at some point, but they're not there yet, apparently. I don't know, I think the alternate EAS is the better way to go right now to try to get the $1 million so we can continue growing this airport. And it's all about seats, people and seats.
I'm looking at it too as, if we're looking to grow, and Karen, you made a good point that this boutique could be a stepping stone, and I get that. But on the other hand, I'm thinking if we have the jet service, how can they turn down grants where we need an expansion? Yeah, we can have 8 people in there for a flight, no big whoopsie. You get 30, yeah, we ain't got the space for that. TSA wants body scanning. That's a no-brainer when you got 30 people coming through here, as opposed to 8.
Runway?
Runway expansion, I mean, we could talk about this for how long, runway expansion. I mean, that would be more of an option, I mean, to move forward. If we're looking to move forward and get some of these things done, or grants or other options in the future, I don't see any of that happening with 8-passenger planes.
How quickly would that happen if we brought a jet in?
I think you hit it within the first year.
I think the thing that we haven't talked about, Karen, that provides a real opportunity from a marketing standpoint, and Barry and I touched on this, is if you price out flights from Chicago to Traverse City, June, July, and August, you regularly see $750 to $1,300 and $1,400 a ticket. Regularly. It'd be interesting to go on right now and look and see what they are. And capping that with our tickets capped at $300-400, I think you would scoop up. I mean, you could put a family of 4 flying from Chicago to here for what 2 tickets cost. I think there's some elasticity in the market that we could become an alternate to Traverse City. And so what if they get in the car and leave? And I think Barry made the point that we're not gonna get an Enterprise or any rental car company of substance with an 8 or a 9-passenger jet that will only come the way it came with Frontier. And if they get in their car and leave and they go to Benzie County or they go to Grand Traverse County and they gas up here and we get motor fuel tax and they grab a burger at Culver's before they get on the road and we put $1 million a year in our pocket, I think the community, all the residents of Manistee will benefit from the $1 million a year.
But too, if they return and they're on a morning flight, they could stay here overnight, check out Manistee, do a little shopping, eat some dinner.
I don't think there's any downside.
But you did make a good point though, as to, for jet service and some of this to work, we are going to need a stable car rental agency.
Well,
We
they
do need
came.
car rental.
You wanna tell that story, Barry, about Enterprise,
Well, I mean,
Frontier?
with Frontier, I've been working before Frontier was here, and I worked after Frontier was here, and it was only when demand of Frontier that Enterprise came, and then when Enterprise announced or when Frontier was announced they were pulling out, so did Enterprise. So it's a chicken and egg of demand. I mean, you've got car rental, you've got other services like Uber and Lyft. I mean, technically, we are on the app for those services. There are no drivers in our community because there's not the demand, but yet multiple times a week, I get people that come up to the desk and saying, you know, you got Uber and Lyft, right? Well, technically, but you're not gonna find a ride. So there's a supply and demand that we're too small to attract certain services that we need to be successful.
Cody Watson's interested in exploring a conversation. I talked to him a couple weeks ago about car rentals.
He's been in, I've talked with him multiple times, and it's come and gone because they've had other priorities, but.
Yeah, timing's different, you could re-engage.
And if there was demand,
Right.
then that would probably
Help.
It would move the needle into the positive category.
Make it more of a front burner issue for them.
Yes, because they already have the agreements in place with Hertz. It's just
Mhm.
their capacity to undertake that.
Mhm.
They purchased the former Dave's Auto
Mhm.
back they're using for their detailing business, but the front office, that's, the reason they purchased that was that that would be a rental car desk.
To me, the best thing you can do to help him grow his business is grow passengers to rent his cars.
So, you know, I don't disagree about Jet. I just still have an attitude about Contour. I mean, I wish there was another jet service I would have, put a bid in.
Well,
Um,
so to that, so if DOT were to go out for rebid, Denver Air Connection could potentially at that point, decide to bid on us. The last round, they bid in the region, 2 cities, Muskegon and some other city, southern Illinois, and they got, well, not official, but they got Muskegon and not the other one. I reached out to them on Friday, hoping to have a conversation, and they kind of explained the situation that, you know, we might be in a position where, and if they would have interest, and his schedule just hasn't allowed me to actually have a call with him. His only available time was 8:30 p.m. Friday night, and I already had plans Friday night, so I couldn't.
Do they serve O'Hare or have gate,
Yes.
assignments there?
Yes,
So they could do Manistee to O'Hare?
yes. So
Would
they
you-
currently serve Ironwood in the UP to O'Hare, somewhere South Dakota, I believe, and then Muskegon will be next.
And who are their code share or interlines?
They are United partner based.
that would be nice.
So DOT, by the end of the week, is gonna make a decision to rebid, pick an airline, or, is that what's happening?
I mean, DOT's so if we kind of just talk about what could happen under different
Could.
scenarios.
Mhm.
So DOT could, if, as they indicated yesterday, award something by the end of this week. That would either be our recommendation, rebid, or they potentially could award, given what they told me about scheduled air service stuff, they wouldn't award Contour, but they could decide to award Boutique, but at a lower cost, lower frequency. And then we would have to basically fight that. I mean, you know, I mean, I'm just, you asked me what they could do.
Yeah, sure.
Um,
Mhm.
They could award Cape Air to both Muskegon and Manistee against both communities' interests. Highly, highly unlikely, but it's the lowest cost bid.
I don't think Cape Air really wants to stay.
No, they don't.
Well,
I've heard
if they
that-
had both, they do,
I've heard
Yeah.
that they misread things in their round of bidding, and they
Okay.
maybe should have done things differently.
Yeah.
What they can't award us is single engine, because we didn't give a waiver for that. So, everything else, they
Mhm.
could award, even though it goes against us.
Yeah.
But then it would boil down to a political squabble. We would probably appeal if it was something that we didn't want,
Mhm.
and, which would delay things most likely as well. So,
I wouldn't mind, I mean, I'd do the fight. If they're going against what we really do want, it's worth the fight. In my
Yeah, we
opinion.
can't go lower.
So what do we really want?
Mm-mm.
That would be,
I want 10,000 employments.
Here's the other thing that when I bring up, you know, jet, yes, we need a longer air, we need stuff inside here, we need staff. I mean, these are the things. They also talked about, the thing that stuck in my head was Boutique had some sort of anti-freeze thing built right into their engines,
Mhm.
where Contour said they'd have to do the de-icing. Did I have
Yeah.
that mixed up?
Well, no, you don't, but there's,
Yes or no?
yeah. Yeah.
there's truth to what you're saying, but your impression isn't accurate. So,
Mhm.
all aircraft need de-icing protection. The design of the Piaggio makes that less necessary, but all aircraft have it, otherwise they wouldn't be certified to fly.
Yeah.
So that is not an issue.
Mm-hmm.
It potentially reduces some costs for boutique because they have to use less de-icing.
So my concern would be, we go with jet service starts July first.
October first.
I'm just using it, July first. Truly, are we ready? You know, I hate to see 3 to 6 months of bad customer service, because we don't have everything in place until we can get a grant, until we can make the changes. You know, because in Manistee, everybody around this table knows, you get one chance. Screw it up, they hold it against you.
I believe we are ready, and I think that was
That's
the point of Adam's question earlier. We did it when Frontier was here, and yes, we were bursting at our seams, but we made it work. Periodically, when Public Charters was out providing service in the summer, we had 30-seat jet service. I know 1 4th of July, we actually had 3 scheduled flights on a Friday and 3 on a Sunday with 30 seats. I mean, we sold them out. So I know that we can handle it. Again, we're bursting at our seams, but we can do it. And we didn't receive at that time negative feedback by how we were doing it. Is it ideal? No, but I would say it is, from a customer perspective, being inconvenienced when something is busy. Yeah, it's kind of annoying, but it's more understandable than, you know, you're 3 people sitting in there and my flight's canceled.
Or I can't get on because of weight and balance.
Those issues, I think, are less understandable than, oh, we've got to line up because we've all got to file through TSA.
Mm-hmm.
That happens at every airport. You've got, I mean, we're spoiled.
Only
in some
30
ways.
people, for God's sake.
Well, we're spoiled by the fact that TSA is like, oh, it's 2 minutes, and you open the gates, you know, and then you get up and you go over there and go through, as opposed to a queue at any large airport that you're
700-yard
there
walk
for
or longer.
an hour.
And you know, a couple of things. I wonder how many times we'll actually be at 30 and bursting at the seams. We might be at 17, 20, 23. That plane might be at 80% full most of the time, still offering greater enplanements, but the number of times where we'll actually be at 30 with the long line is very few. The second thing I really wonder that nobody's discussed here, how many airports does Boutique serve altogether?
They currently serve 2.
So, you know, one thing that I think that DOT may be looking at, that we around this table never asked the question of, and ironically, we viewed Contour's 25% capital injection or equity injection is a liability. I don't know why. I would ask, what is the financial wherewithal and longevity of Boutique serving 2 airports? I wonder if they don't have their leases in place, because their balance sheet could be Swiss cheese. They're doing no volume.
Well, they've already had 14 or more.
I get it. Where I'm going with it, George, is that their revenue's fallen off a cliff. They were at 14 and now they're at 2. There are some real questions that should be looked at about the financial longevity of this company. Serving 2 airports is not a robust company.
Well, they were a organization that knew that they were in trouble, so they've they've done an adaptation, they've changed.
I'm just saying, we haven't looked at it. Nobody around the table, to my knowledge, and if you have, somebody correct me, but
You're not, I mean, they're not a public company, so you don't get that information. You can ask them, and they're going to spin it's the
think
way
what
they want to.
What's at the heart of my point is the DOT has never done this level of due diligence, I think is what I've heard. They are peeling back the onion here in a way that they don't customarily do.
If you read boutique, that is what they're saying, yes.
Okay, great.
Yep.
And it's with an airline that serves 2 airports. So maybe they know something that we don't know about a very small provider. I'll just leave it at that.
On the flip side, you get, my concern with Southwest stepping into Skywest, stepping into Contour, it's like, okay, so you had to sell off a quarter of your business to get some money in to obviously support whatever. That's concerning. Secondly, you get concerned about the larger corporations like this who are working their hardest to eradicate the smaller jets,
That's
you know?
what's happening.
So a quarter of your business now is sitting with such a person,
But
you know,
that's,
such an
but that's
organization.
because of the PA 380, correct? Along with the availability of those planes to put them in service as opposed to sitting there.
What's the downside to that, Karen?
It is a concern having that larger corporation kind of eradicating that whole system.
In 2
Well,
years,
and then we're
it's
getting
long gone.
And we're stuck.
Let me kind of give the background on that. So SkyWest owns 90 of these jets, and they're old. They're not spring chickens. And we know older things have a tendency to break more. But the reason SkyWest isn't flying them isn't because they don't want to. It's because Delta has said, we don't want, as part of our brand, aircraft that don't have first-class seats, or what we call first class in this country, which is business class in the rest of the world. So therefore, Delta and Delta's first mover, United and American, have basically said, well, we're going to have to follow suit because we can't be considered the inferior airline because of our, makeup. So it is a decision at the majors that is then forcing changes at SkyWest. So now SkyWest is basically parking aircraft that can fly. And I'll say this is, Paris Technims aren't the mechanically most reliable aircraft in the world. But if you've got 4 of them sitting here, you've always got one that's working. And SkyWest has got enough airframes that they can do that with something that may not be a spring chicken and may not be the most reliable. They can provide good service. Now, I don't know the business relationship there. They're still 2 separate companies, even though there's investment. So is Contour in a position where they can acquire that many airframes to operate routes? Probably not. But unlike Cape Air and Boutique, with us being their only route into O'Hare, Contour does have other routes. So that means you have spare aircraft based in Chicago that can support any line of flying that may have an issue without having to have 4 aircraft to operate one line of flying. So it's I'm trying to incorporate some of what you were about to say, I think. These aren't, at this point, the most reliable aircraft. They're old, worn.
They're parked in a desert somewhere waiting to be certified.
But they can be, as I believe, we demonstrate here, if you've got enough spares, you can operate reliably for a good period of time. But the other reality is that there is nothing right now between 9 seats and soon to be 70 seats as being manufactured that's new.
Right.
So if we ever want to bridge that gap, the gap keeps getting wider, and either we're grabbing onto the tail of the 50-seater for, you know, the next 10 years before it's gone, or I don't know.
You have to demonstrate the need is here to get anywhere. And if you don't demonstrate the need, you're not going to be advancing the airport and the service to the community.
All that said, I guess I'm like, again, the nervous liar here. Thanks for saying, it's okay. They're old. I mean, all of that's like, oh my God, you know, it just makes you feel like.
You wanna get on a new Boeing?
I want something nice that's gonna stay in the air.
You know how old B-52s are?
Oh my gosh. But see, this is how ridiculous the system is getting.
But we can't control, we only can control what's in our
The
purview.
certifications we need, isn't Boutique in for certifications and changing landing gear and
Well-
aren't there 3 or 4 points?
There was
We
land.
have an expert sitting right here, let's ask the expert.
They're all sitting there waiting to be flown, and as long as they're sitting and waiting, they're not flying, they need to be recertified for whatever market they're
These
going
are the
in.
jets we're talking about.
Regardless whether it's a Piaggio or, every plane
But the
that's gonna come
Piaggio
here
needed
under-
to get certified is what came up, I thought during a
He said it's
meeting,
getting
that
new gear,
wasn't.
he didn't say it was
Right, no, it-
required for
it-
this market.
It needs to be put back on their operating
Right,
certificate,
right.
which is a certification, but it's different than what George is talking about.
Making-
Regardless whether you go with Contour or Boutique, there's some work that would need to be done for any plane that, so it's
Right.
neutral.
And I would say that the Piaggios also are an older design. That's 25 years ago, I think
That,
they
yeah.
started.
1990s they came out.
So, they probably are
Newer.
lower hours because they weren't used in kind of a highly intensive commercial service environment. They were generally used for private charter, so they won't have the hours. But they're also, you know, they're not, technically, you could order one today and maybe they could be produced. Technically, I don't know anyone that's, you know, acquired one within the last 8 years probably, but, so, you know, some of these,
Peter
you go down one thing and then you can say, well, the other side also has some of those same characteristics.
So like, let's say we were to go down the path of jet service, I've kind of stayed quiet all day, and mostly because I'm waffling, I'm not sure if this is productive, because it's strictly feeling based. Like, the Contour guy, he came off as so arrogant, kind of like, well, this is what we do. I didn't get the sense
Take it
from
or
him
leave it.
that that company would be a company who would work with us enthusiastically to understand that maybe being successful in this market with the kind of people that are here in Manistee, like, I was wholly unimpressed with, his comments on customer service and kind of in general, how he came with 5 slides and said, really, this is what's important. Like, he can dictate to us what's important. He didn't cover kind of the rest of the content. I know he just came up, that's probably why, at the end of the day, my vote was surprising to me. And I think him, he played a big part, and I keep on pointing here because I think he was sitting right here. But that said, like, there's no guarantee of this going out for rebid, and Denver Air would bid in addition to Contour, right?
I had hoped to have more information on that, but do not yet.
Yeah, and that indicates to me probably not. I mean, they would have jumped right on that, I would think, if they had the opportunity.
Can encourage
Well, but
them
it
to
might
say
be
we want
different
to
now,
rebid.
right?
We already
Because if
put
they
it out
do get
That's
Muskegon.
kind of what
we
we
did.
Yeah.
So you said we'd like to rebid?
No, I
No,
said that
I mean-
DOT may be doing a rebid, so I'm reaching out, well,
Yeah.
the wording I put in there was, if you weren't going to bid in a rebid, I don't see any reason we care about a rebid, because we've already
Got it.
received bids from everybody except you.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's really gonna change.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, if DOT said no to Boutique, and what is a rebid going to accomplish other than
Delay.
wasting months? That we would most likely then go Contour, because that would be our really only viable option at that point.
Mm-hmm.
If Denver Air Connection said, yes, we'd love to bid on Manistee, and we went to a rebid, that then adds another, viable contender into the
And they would be a
decision.
contender potentially, like, pretend it happened. They're more in terms of volume and
Their
airplane.
their reputation from a customer service standpoint, they're very conservative in their growth, why they haven't bid on us.
Mhm.
They realistically are, people either go after SkyWest or go after Denver Air Connection, generally, if those are available options, then Contour is generally a third, partly because Contour operates Part 380, Denver Air Connection is just standard Part 121, so there's no hoops to jump through. It's much more what one would expect.
Is there some limited flexibility with Part 121? I don't understand what the implication is to Manistee Blacker, based on,
Part 121 means standard EAS, no waivers, no exemptions, they can fly 50 seats,
Regularly scheduled.
they're not limited to 30, et cetera, et cetera. Part 380, as I was saying earlier, requires that waiver or alternate EAS.
so is this within the realm of possibility? Not saying it's the pleasure of the board, but just trying to understand what action we can take after,
Well, I'm letting everyone have their say, and I was kind of waiting for Alyssa to weigh in, before we start, talking action. But I want everyone to have their say, and I don't want anyone to feel cut off or run over or anything. And at that point, with that having been said, anything that anyone would like to add that we haven't already talked about? Yes.
I have one question, I guess. So alternate EAS, we've done it before. Let's say we know how to do it, but is that still the same comment, knowing that you are, coming up on retirement here? Like, you've done it before, you've been at the helm when we've been successful. Is that any type of concern or consideration, knowing that if we went down that route, you wouldn't be here to administer it?
No.
Okay.
No, there's paperwork involved, and, that could be done, at the courthouse, it could be done here. One thing that hasn't come up in this conversation about alternates is that because of the contractual relationships, it's basically a block grant to the airport, and the airport has a contract with the carrier. We have the opportunity to include in that contract terms that we want. So if there are things about Contour that we're concerned about, we can,
Get rid of the
put those,
president?
huh?
We can get rid of the president?
We can ask, I'm not sure he's gonna sign that agreement.
Some coaching and not an asshole.
So, unlike standard EAS, where we're bystanders, we're not part of any agreement, we actually do have a contract. And under our previous, with public charters, we had terms in there that were not very, they didn't have a lot of teeth in them. It's hard sometimes to put terms around customer service and, reliability, because you can't think of all of the
Sure.
exceptions to the rules. But, we did attempt to do some of those things and did have some clauses in there. So, there is an opportunity that is helpful to us potentially down that path. So it's not all negative, that sure. There are some positives.
So we operated under that prior to Cape Air, Alyssa.
Mhm.
Alyssa, did that?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. George, anything else?
Well, knowing what I know about the airlines and seeing like SkyWest hangar across from ours, over years and years, one year it was filled up with Delta Planes connection, then it was American Express, then it was United Express. They're just chasing after wherever they can find the money. So it sounds like what he was trying to do too. Is he gonna be here in 2 years? I don't know, maybe, possibly. And that 25% of SkyWest goes away. Maybe he's building something, maybe he's not. It's a big kissing game. And everything I read about their service is terrible. Kirkland was waiting for the 30-seat jet for a long time before they got it. Probably it was being recertified to get into service, yet they got the contract before, just to get the contract, so,
Did they have a plane coming in the meantime?
yeah.
Part of my conversation with Contour is that they have now recently
That's right.
taken six
Yeah.
aircraft, from SkyWest, so they are starting to see the benefits of that in terms of airframes that they can utilize. But yes, they're,
And you said they're slower paying bills.
well, I think that's why a 25%
Yeah.
investment was necessary at that timeframe. And
So it's,
Okay, so where we are,
it's,
okay. So where we are then is, if we do nothing, is we're just going along, waiting for the DOT to do its thing, and there it is. Or we can make a motion here to, go with the alternative, EAS. That's how I'm kind of boiling it down. That's not a motion. That's just some,
I think there are
summarizing.
other options.
And that's why I wanna, yeah,
And it boils down to those, but the timing could be slightly different.
okay,
So, we have a regular meeting coming up on Monday. So, if we're not in a position or we want to think about this for a few days, we could request DOT to delay any order to be after our next meeting,
mhm,
so that we have time to maybe provide additional guidance to them on what we want.
mhm.
They would have no problem delaying an order once I communicated why, what the circumstance is.
But otherwise, this Friday, potentially, we could
Potentially,
get a
it
phone
could
call
be
this
as
Friday.
early as this Friday, which could end the process for us
Right,
if it was selecting boutique,
right,
or cause the process to just continue, and then Monday's meeting, we could be figuring out, based on that. So
right.
there are some tactics that can buy us more time if we
Mhm,
don't want to make a decision today.
mhm.
But, yes, I mean, it is status quo with boutique and see how DOT goes with that. It is basically saying to DOT, stop the presses, we want to go alternate EAS with Contour. 3, kind of a variant of number 1, wait for a rebid if that were to happen, and that's not a guarantee. And then see if we can attract Denver Air Connection.
Yeah.
And Denver Air Connect was sent the same thing to everybody else, got it.
Word.
They were well aware.
we get 100,000, 600,000, or a million, depending on.
150, 600 million.
So it's not like we're going backwards with boutique. If we do step up, we're gonna take a huge jump.
No, but the catch becomes, do you wanna leave that money on the table if you don't hit those numbers?
Well, that's,
Yeah.
it's kind of,
Is there another option where, you're able to somehow get on the phone with Denver Air Connection in the next day or whatever, and then we go to DOT and say, hey, really what we're interested in is jet service. We know Denver Air, if it went out for rebid, would also bid. That would allow us to consider Contour or Denver Air. Like, is that, something that could be proactively communicated to DOT?
Yes, but here's how that would need to happen.
Mm.
Because DOT could award boutique. So we would have to go to DOT and say, we retract our recommendation for boutique
Mm-hmm.
and request that you go out for rebid,
Mm-hmm.
so that they don't
Yeah, okay,
award.
but, so yeah.
So yes,
so the
there
answer
is
yes.
there
Yeah,
is
the answer
a way
okay.
to do it, but it would involve that step.
But where you're heading though is, would we be able to get some guarantee from Denver Air that they would actually be in that mix?
What would have changed
Right.
for Denver Air?
Well, the only thing that would have changed is now they have the Muskegon
Uh-huh.
route.
Right.
And
And they
there's
had bid
that.
on 2, they got 1. So
There-
that means
there-
they
there
felt
is
they
an
had enough
opening
capacity to do 2.
What was the other one they bid on?
That's what I was just gonna ask.
Carbondale or something like that?
it
You
was
said
Southern
earlier,
Illinois,
didn't
but
you?
it was
Yeah.
into O'Hare too, and they were looking at that as kind of,
They got quite a, they go to Minneapolis, there's a couple of Minnesota destinations, South Dakota, Iowa, they've got quite a Midwestern setup
Footprint.
already.
With Denver as their,
Yeah, Denver.
as their hub.
that's obviously
Right.
where they're based, yes.
I would think they looked at it and said, we'll place our bet on our horse on Muskegon.
Muskegon, yeah.
And they're viewing this as splitting the baby between Manistee and Muskegon. They're just saying, we're gonna pull our one customer.
Which is more lucrative, or which is the potential for them.
Right.
That they would get.
Hence their bid for Muskegon.
Well, I mean, Egan has a track record of far more employments than we do, so.
Hence
you know,
their
it
bid
makes-
for Muskegon.
And again, as I said, they are conservative in their growth, so they don't overcommit and underdeliver, which is why they're viewed as being a very reliable and good carrier.
I guess I want just a straight answer on two things. One, will boutique hit that 10,000? They said they would, but I've heard that the numbers
Well,
don't add up.
And that was the third thing in my email, is
Mhm.
it is not realistically possible for boutique to
Right.
get to 10,000 in 2 years. In 4 years, you project outgrowth, yes. But that means in 2 years, it would go through this process again, and we need to argue that we need more capacity, because the issue is that with the number of flights boutique and the size of the airplane, it's not physically possible. It technically is, but it's not practical, to get to 10,000. The spreadsheet, it shows, I plug in a maximum load factor of 80% because
Mhm.
based on what I've learned from Cape Air and that size aircraft, you know, in the summer when we're busting out of the seams, we get 78, 79% load factor just because that's
Yep.
the most you can get. So I have that as a variable. And if you plug that in and that starts chopping you off, to get to 10,000, we're being limited, like 9 of the 12 months of the year, we're demand's way over here, but we're here because of capacity, just to fill out a few extra seats in January and February to get to 10,000. It's just not practical.
But that was the discussion, and I
But
heard
they
a lot.
but they never set a time frame for that. And in thinking about it,
How devious is that?
well,
How, devious?
We-
I didn't hear you.
in what we put together and sent to them, we said our goals are to grow,
Mhm.
and we want to see proposals that get us to 8,000 in 2 years and 10,000 in 4 years. So they were responding based on that, which was technically what we had given them. So they never said 10,000 and 2 years.
The other
And it's-
thing,
So, can they get us to 10,000? Yes. In 2 years? No.
the other thing is the plane. You know, we want the Piaggio, they have one, assumed that they would have two, but no single engine plane going over Lake Michigan. I mean, we don't want that,
We-
so what's their plan?
Well,
Their plan
Yeah,
is
they-
in their email where they have
Yeah.
3 other aircraft already identified, and they've listed what they
Oh,
are,
there it
so.
is.
Just so you can have them, but they're coming to us,
Yes.
right?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
And it's,
Yeah.
because they do have the numbers and everything on them, I don't know where it's at.
Yeah, it's on that first
Yeah.
one down there.
No, in every communication I've had with them, they've been very clear that 4 aircraft for the Manistee route, and those is their plan as to how to get that.
Mhm.
So I have, mixed feelings on both. They both have pros and they both have cons. The two that I have with boutique is, you know, we're probably gonna get to 10,000 over the next several years. The second thing is, I have a little bit of a problem if DOT says that they need to cut back. Because we can't afford to go back and do less employment than what we have now. We're trying to move forward. So that's a big negative if they should go that route. I mean, that's an if, but it's there.
Well, and
So,
the changes in the FAA reauthorization are really focused around controlling the cost increase in EAS. Since COVID, costs for EAS have probably doubled, if not more. I mean, talk about inflation, I mean, it's like 40% a year increase in costs. It's pilot wages, I mean, you pay attention to the industry, wages are significantly going up throughout, and that creates a whole cascading ripple effect. Fuel has been expensive, maintenance, parts, supply chain, all of those things. So DOT, Congress is saying, this isn't sustainable. We need to put in controls that cap cost of the program. Well, you cap costs by limiting service. So that's what a lot of these changes are about, them being able to utilize the cost of the proposal as a factor in making a decision, and also eliminating some of these constraints that allow us to get entitled to more capacity than otherwise we would. Now, our history also puts us in a bad starting position because of that 1984 determination. Again, comparing to other airports in the state, if we were any other airport in the state, that wouldn't be as much of a factor because we'd still be in a comfortable position. But we're just handicapped by that history there.
From a government, or a federal government perspective, it doesn't seem like we're in an enviable position to be coming up on a contract in 2 years. There's nothing the federal government is doing, signaling to us that life is gonna get better for small airports that haven't demonstrated demand with this legislation. It looks as though...
I don't know, you know, the processes behind crafting the language of this, because if you look at what came out of Senator Peters' office, he's touting all of the great improvements for small community air service and how we're guarding small community air service. And the reality as it relates to us is not that reality, and
that's at the heart of my point. And so I think what I'm saying is the quicker we can demonstrate greater demand and lock up a contract that secures our federal funding for 3 years instead of 2 years with greater capacity and ring our register here in Manistee with more money sooner, the better off I think this airport is for making its improvements and doing what it has to do. I would not want to, with federal deficits in the trillions, tens of trillions, and costs soaring, I would not want to be going to the federal government asking for more money any sooner than I had to.
I have another appointment. We're going on 2 hours
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a,
All right, so does someone want to make a motion right now? Now's the time to do it.
Well, my question would be, do we need to rescind a motion to make a motion? If you gotta rescind, it comes from the prevailing side. That would be my assumption that we would have to do, would have to rescind the previous motion to put a new one on the floor. Because otherwise you'd have competing motions.
Right, right.
Anybody could do that except me.
Well, yeah. Well, let's see where it goes. I will make a motion to rescind the boutique option 2 EAS agreement. I think that's that.
Okay. We have a second on that? No second? Okay.
I
Do you have a
wasn't here for
question?
voting, so I don't know if I can...
question?
Yeah,
No.
It doesn't
You
matter
can
on the
vote.
second.
You can vote.
Now, what you're saying is to resend our bid, or
Our current bid, yes.
Yeah.
So where we can, then we can go.
The current motion that
Current
passed,
option we have.
Current recommendation
Yes.
is what we're rescinding,
Yes.
or is what the motion is.
Correct.
and that is to then go with contour, or
No,
is that?
that would just-
Another motion.
Step is
That
we're
would be another motion.
talking
Something
about.
else.
Two-step process.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha, okay, I just want to be clear on that, because I'm a little bit torn between the two here, so.
Mhm.
It,
I just,
yeah, it's difficult, 'cause
it's difficult, and I just don't want to make the wrong decision either, but, I don't know if this is the right one either, you know, we've got, I don't know.
We need a second to actually debate it any further.
Yeah, can't talk about it now.
Okay.
All right,
My thought process is, again, people, seats, follows money. We get that. The other thing of it is if there is an inference, reading between the lines or the tea leaves, what have you, that if we were to get pushed to option one with Cape Air, that is a status quo move.
Boutique, you mean?
Boutique.
That's a concern.
Looking at the number of employments, it's a status quo.
Yes, correct.
any other discussion?
I don't know, have we put the, I mean, you know, just kind of think about Barry, just like, we get the phone call, get the discussion,
Yeah,
you know, instead of going this way,
right.
it would help us to be able to kind of better figure out what to do.
And the other option is to, ask for a delay in the DOT's position.
Which you still may want to rescind,
Exactly.
We have to rescind in order to delay
yeah.
the decision-making, so
Mhm.
the rescinding is fine, but, you know, I'm not ready to vote.
Are you ready to vote to rescind?
That's the conversation.
Do we have to
right now.
vote to rescind to ask for a delay?
I think that would be
That is,
appropriate, because
okay.
otherwise you're sending mixed messages to DOT.
Okay, this
saying,
is,
"Here's our
this is new to
selection,"
my mind.
And, oh, wait, maybe not.
Should the
Yeah.
motion
There
be,
needs to be something that
Yeah.
backs up the.
should the motion be to rescind and ask for a delay
Mm-hmm.
instead of just rescind?
Or that could just be a
Could
separate
be, that,
motion
I would say
after.
that'd be a second one, because
Yeah, it would be.
you've still got the option of, if you don't want a delay.
I'm just gonna say, much like the last meeting, these are hard decisions, and you never have all of the information, facts that you want.
Mhm.
And you have to make uncomfortable decisions based on your best reading of what the future holds. And it's not easy.
Well, we never are gonna get the
I'm
perfect
glad I'm
bid.
not in your position. I
Mhm.
don't have the vote.
Yeah.
I mean, my only biggest reason for this is if DOT should say, you're gonna only have X amount of flights, and then we've just gone backwards, and there's nothing we can do for the next 2 years. There is gonna be no grants we can file to expand the airport or the runway or anything there is nothing. I mean, we could do it, but they're gonna look at us and say, you only got so many flights, you know, it's like, no.
Which
I mean,
think
I'm just looking forward to, if we wanna go forward and expand, boutique is fine, but if DOT comes back and says, okay, you're gonna get boutique, but they're gonna fly 3 days a week, or, 3 round trips a day, or whatever it might be. That sets us backwards. I think for me, that's a pause. To wait a minute.
they could do that with any airline.
Mhm.
You're never gonna get the perfect bid, the way it is.
Yeah.
But it would be nice to have a different provider than Contour.
Well, I agree that it'd be nice if Denver would throw
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
hat in the ring there to give us another option.
All right, that was the universe saying that.
So
Okay.
let's vote on that.
Okay, so we need a roll call on that, and I need to be the last one, called.
All right,
And the motion again is to rescind the boutique,
option two.
Recommendation.
recommendation, yes.
Okay, Kaminsky. Goodman,
Yes.
Lasky,
Yes.
Dons, Adams,
No,
Becker,
no.
Jeff Dons, yes. Egan,
I'm gonna go no on that as well, okay?
5-2.
So, but it does pass. All right, so now, we've made that motion to rescind. Now, we can either, we've talked about two options here, alternative option or the, ask for a delay. So,
So I'm gonna make a motion that we request to the DOT to delay their delayed decision.
So when?
If by, I think we can still discuss it right while I'm making a motion. Here's what I
No.
can't vote on yes for, alternate EAS until we've at least continued to make and spoken to or made like a seriously good faith effort, and they've not gotten back to us, which is just as good as having a conversation with Denver Air Connection. So I would think until
Monday?
after our meeting next week, yeah, on
Well,
Monday.
could we give them till Friday, so when we all got back around the table, we could know what's going on and go around our votes on our Monday meeting, on Monday the 20th, because if we give them till the close of business on Monday, then we're either gonna call a special meeting, or we're gonna...
No.
I would recommend
At least
a week from Friday.
Yeah, a week.
So-
what would that date, would you say?
24th.
So, 'cause, yeah, that to me makes sense, 'cause that gives
Because
time, you
That
time
would
to
give
get
me
hold.
time to
Mhm.
write things and
Okay.
based on a decision on Monday.
And our guidance to you can be like, hey,
Okay,
try really hard, you gotta get in touch with them by Friday, so that Monday's meeting,
Well,
we can try to have a
I was going to
discussion.
suggest, assuming this is the direction we go, that we try to get potentially Contour, Denver Air on our call on Monday,
yeah,
so that we can ask them directly these questions.
yeah,
Get me out of the middle.
Okay.
So your
sure.
motion was to
And
delay
potentially
it
boutique too, I don't know,
to-
but we
till-
can decide that
until
after.
May 24th,
Request
Is that
delay from the
Friday?
DOT until May 24.
right.
Yeah.
That's what I wrote down.
Yes.
Okay, do we have, in your second, okay.
Becker. No. What was that?
No.
Lasky,
Yes.
Goodman,
Yes.
Kaminsky,
Yes.
Jeff Dons. No. Adam does.
Yes.
Mike Egan.
Yes. Yes,
Same numbers, different players.
yep,
So I mean, like, bottom line, guys, over the next week or whatever, we're gonna get more information.
Yeah.
That I
Mhm.
think will allow each of us to feel like we've got at least closer to the amount of information we need to vote again.
mhm.
Maybe as we part company here, if there's anything that any of the members would like to see, to email Barry, because I would hate to be back at the table, be called to a vote, and then not have some information that would have made you feel more comfortable had you had it. So the sooner Barry can know what's on your mind, the sooner he can attempt to get it.
Who would you like me to try to invite to join us for Monday's meeting? Which of the players?
Denver Air, it sounds like is the
Well,
primary
I'd like to
thing
know
people are
if
talking
I
about.
would like to know if they're
If there's
interested.
any
they would bid,
possibility.
yeah.
And it might be a no.
And if it's a no, then.
Then,
That's fine too.
and honestly,
Then here we
I
go.
don't know
We
that
know
any much
where
more.
we're at, yeah.
Do we want to invite Contour in on Monday to a Zoom
Yeah, that might not be bad. I might like to hear about some of the things that he didn't think were important to present the first time we heard from him.
Right.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Seriously.
No, it's true.
I think he's gonna
That's
say.
why I'm
All right,
over
boutique.
it.
Exactly.
Before we start leaving Boutique, do we invite Boutique to come in? Well, not to come in, but to Zoom in.
I suspect they will
They probably will
be
anyway.
on.
I would if I was them,
Whether
but-
they're on the agenda or not is a different,
I don't have any
Different thing.
specific questions or requests of Boutique.
Me neither.
Some things are out of their control as far as what the DOT will do, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
The only thing I would request is whatever information, get it to us as soon as possible. So
Yeah.
the more availability, the more info we have, so we don't have to deliberate here
Yeah.
as much, is advantageous.
Right,
Thank you.
All right.
Yep.
all
All
right.
right, well, there you go.
Thank you, everybody.
turn at
Do you,
1:02.
Well, the community couldn't possibly accuse us of just brushing things, just